This is the Second Studio, hosted by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Borodero-Renee. The two of us are architects, partners at the office, and of course, hosts of the show. And today, our guest is Stephen Fleming.
Stephen is an architectural theorist and an author, and he's based in Newcastle, Australia.
Yes, and at first, we met Stephen through his Instagram page, which is called Fleming on Architecture. We'll put the link in the show notes. And I thought, followers, listeners, you have to go to his page and check it out. But he does these little short reels where he does voiceovers, and he's incredibly smart. He has a PhD in architecture. So I would classify him as a historian. He understands so much about architecture and the history of it. And on his Instagram page, he gives these little often funny and directly to the point remarks about specific things, academia or past buildings that other people have done or famous architects, this and this and that. Anyway, that's how I found him. And so the conversation with him was, of course, how he got into all of this and his kind of life journey and his thoughts about the education of architecture, him teaching, him lecturing, him flying around the world and giving less lectures and what he has going on next in his life. And it was just a real pleasure to have a nice, 90-minute conversation with somebody who knows his stuff really, really deeply and has, I think, very salient points to be made about all things architecture.
Yeah, it was a very nice conversation.
Yeah, and he surfs too. Sponsors.
This episode of The Second Studio is brought to you by BQE Core, the all-in-one firm management software built for architects. Designed by architects for architects, Core helps you track time effortlessly, manage projects seamlessly, and get paid faster so you can focus on design, not spreadsheets. With powerful automation and real-time insights, it's everything you need to run a smarter, more profitable firm. See how BQE Core can transform your practice by clicking the link in our show notes. The Second Studio podcast is sponsored by Autodesk. And do you know about Autodesk Forma? Available standalone or as part of the AEC Collection software bundle, it's a specialized AI-assisted 3D design tool that can transform early project planning. With Forma, you can rapidly model multiple massing options at the start of projects and analyze the embodied carbon cost of different volumes, layouts, and material choices. You can then deepen your understanding of your sites by incorporating real-world contextual data for daylight, wind, noise, and more. So start your projects right with Autodesk Forma. Check out the link in our show notes to learn more.
This is The Second Studio with Marina, myself, and our guest, Stephen. Here we go.
I'm actually in my hometown now. I've moved away many times, but family it's always brought me back. So I'm in Newcastle, which you can almost see out the window if I lean back. It's I've got a great view of the city from where I am. It's an industrial city. My father worked in the steel works. There are huge coal mines nearby. So, the city has really been ran by now coal export and then the coal running the steel works. So sort of grew up in the plume of pollution from that activity, but it's just a coal port now. I mean, architecturally, I look at this city. So I studied architecture here, started in 1987 at the School of Architecture at Newcastle. It was a pioneering course, pioneering integrated problem-based learning, an all-in-one, all-consuming, fantastic education.
Do you say problem-based learning?
Yeah, problem-based learning. So rather than having separate courses that you put together to make a suite of courses that ultimately creates a degree program, you would just do one course for the whole year, and it was pass or fail. And all of the different study areas were all related to the design project you're working on. So it took an awful lot of commitment from the staff members. Eventually it collapsed under its own weight. It was too wieldy to keep going. So look, I studied architecture right when that program was coming in. I did my 2 undergraduate degrees at Newcastle and ultimately did my PhD at Newcastle, and then became a lecturer at Newcastle. So a real homegrown boy. I moved away a lot. I worked in Singapore, sabbaticals in New York, all sorts of cool stuff. And since, very international in the things that I've done. But yeah, a big commitment really to this one city and to that School of Architecture at Newcastle.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So the Newcastle is the Newcastle. Like you might have heard the saying "carrying coals to Newcastle,"
Yeah.
which is to say that you're doing something that is, I guess, like pointless or redundant. I didn't know the Newcastle was in Australia. For some reason, I always assumed it was in like I don't know, the UK or something.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, so Newcastle upon Tyne is the where the name comes from, and I believe that expression might actually come from that Newcastle.
Gotcha.
Now, don't ask me, but I have a hunch that because we've got a lot of coal here, and now a lot more coal here, we might have been named after that. Oh, who knows? Don't. It's pure speculation.
What you said you got 2 undergraduate degrees? What were they in?
Oh, architecture. Yeah. So, and I think it's pretty common. So a 3-year degree, then a break when I went and had a building design practice, and come back and do the second degree for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty much, it's everywhere. So the International Union of Architects dictates that all schools of architecture, that an architectural training involves 5 years of university. So that's global.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. How did you know that you were going to study architecture?
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, we're going back to childhood now. Look, I drew and drew and drew incessantly. I've kept all of my old sketchbooks from when I was a kid, and then at some point you start drawing dream houses, and then I did work experience in an architect's office here in Newcastle in 1983 as a 15-year-old. Guy who took me under his wing, his name's Mark Lawler. I was just talking to him recently. He's only just retired and sold his practice.
Wow.
He was a crack up. This guy was so funny. He still is. And here I am as a 15-year-old being introduced to Louis Kahn, designing buildings in the manner of, looking at the whites, the styles of the 80s. The whites and the greys. And
yeah.
And just being around this guy who was just undoing me with his, withering sense of humor constantly. And I thought, wow, this is the life for me, just sitting around with a group of people who were so funny. And I haven't met a funny architect since.
I was gonna say, what you described does not sound like the typical architect.
Yeah, so Mark really led me astray there.
Yeah. You thought that was the profession, that the cult of architecture were going to be like that.
All these serious, dour people.
Yeah, I'm surprised you're not wearing black. That's the color. That's the chosen color of.
Yeah. In Australia, we've got this children's band called the Wiggles, and they all wear different colour skivvies, and bright coloured skivvies for kids. And we used to joke that the architects were the black Wiggles.
And then what made you decide to get a PhD? I assume the PhD is in architecture as well. I mean, if that's the case, you were pretty serious and a serious academic. And like, why not go and just practice, right?
Yeah, look, if ever I'd worked for a firm and really respected and gotten into the work of the people I was working for, I might have stayed in practice. But it just so happens that after graduation in 93 in Australia, there was a recession, so really no decent jobs to go into. And I went and I worked for the government in Singapore. So I was designing public housing and a really big park that I got to design when I was over there. Now, when you're taken out of your regular context and you're working in a place like Singapore, and we're doing this sort of high-density Corbusian housing, you can't help but start asking big questions, like, what the hell are we doing here? And I'd done, you have to write a written 20,000-word thesis, I think it is, for your honours year, yeah. So for the final year at university, I performed really well. I got first class honours, and I knew I wrote well, because I had a bit of a side interest in writing all the way through. So,
Hmm.
and then I was asking these big questions. So when I came back to Australia, I was a little bit frustrated, and so I won what's called an Australian Postgraduate Award. It's a pretty common postgraduate degree in Australia. Um, and went in and wrote a PhD and really enjoyed teaching. Yeah, straight away I thought
Hmm.
this is kind of more fun than dealing with builders at 9 o'clock in the morning who are upset about their cement trucks and things. So yeah, and it really suited me. So yeah, did the PhD, became quite a serious and committed scholar, published a few, papers I'm quite proud of. One about light in church architecture and its connection to the Neoplatonic tradition. So, um, yeah, really got immersed in that, and then just loved. As I got more proficient at it, I really enjoyed teaching history. So, and that led, I got the opportunity. Like 6 years, I took study tours around Italy, Greece, France, and
Wow.
Spain, but mainly Italy. And
Hmm.
so really, really became um, au fait, could talk about Borromini, Bramante, Brunelleschi, all these guys, and bring it alive, And I really, really, really enjoyed that, and I know students enjoyed it as well. So, gee, I don't know I can't even remember the question
What
now.
was your PhD thesis on?
Yeah, so Louis Kahn and Platonic philosophy. So Louis Kahn makes a lot of quasi-Platonic utterances. He says that you have the form of the building, and he was talking about the Unitarian church he did in Rochester there. So you have the form, the big idea to the building,
Hmm.
like its constituent parts. And he used the example of a spoon. He said a spoon has a container and an arm. So the
Hmm.
first step in designing a building is to really understand the universal form on which it's designed, and then the design, the manifestation of that can be particular and bent for context and circumstances. Um, so really, and then when I got into his archive, there were direct appeals to Plato, Socrates in lectures that he was giving around the same time. Um, and so that led to a deep dive into Platonic philosophy, which sometimes I joke that all architects are Platonists in a way, you know.
Wait, so for the folk, so
Yeah.
why would you say that?
Um, because in the back of our minds, there is, whether we admit it or not, a utopian vision, some idea about how the world could be and how this particular building is an installment in that world. Um,
Hmm.
and also, the more you design a particular building type, so classic example is people who design a lot of apartment buildings, and Aldo Rossi wrote about this specifically, that you start to see generic types or universal types. And so, I think I've got a friend, he's an architect and he designs a lot of apartment buildings, and, he can basically see exactly what type's going to fit with that site the moment the boundaries come to him. So
Hmm.
I just think it's inescapable. It's part of the discipline of architecture that we would see universals. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Universals in the sense that some aspect of the solution, or a lot of the solution, the design, ends up being very close to what was done before because that's the solution.
yeah. Given the parameters, um, and then the interesting part comes when you start becoming an advocate or a lobbyist for different parameters. Um,
Yeah.
when you start trying to push those boundaries, um, and sadly, I think a lot of architects shrug their shoulders now. they think, oh, Le Corbusier ruined the world. He was an architect. I'm an architect. I'm not going to meddle. And I've heard Ram Koolhaas in an interview I saw with him recently saying exactly this. That there's this reticence that's crept in where architects are really afraid to do anything lest we mess it up. And I mean, who else historically has given the world a vision of how the built environment might look, something else to aspire toward than architects, and usually working, pro bono, publishing books and doing exhibitions during economic recessions. That's, I mean, Le Corbusier wrote and published far more before he ever built, and he did it during a downtime, So, I mean, there's just a prime opportunity there. I've thought this for a long time, and I did it with my last book, which did this, tried to envision, how things might be.
Do you think that has to do with the work of architects being client driven?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let it be. I mean, it has to be sometimes, but you've got extra time, surely, to be showing what could be. So when you're working for clients, do what the clients want. You have to get paid, right? You have to put bread on the table. But but I mean, the bigger philosophical problem is this. Oh no, we can't be utopian. We'll only make things worse if we start being visionary. I just don't see the sense of that. Like, who else is going to? If you've got an idea about how the world could be, put a bit of time into, it's so easy these days to disseminate these ideas too. If you've got a vision, you start a website and or you put it on Instagram, something like that. Yeah, you don't even have to wait for a design competition,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So when you said parameters, I was trying to think about what is a specific example or hypothetical example of what a parameter would be. It would be something like the zoning limitations.
Yeah,
like,
of course,
is that what?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, I think we're probably quickly approaching the time when a software company might think it's worthwhile just to come up with an AI program that instantly designed the building that met all the parameters.
Yes.
So the client wants site yield. The local government will have a planning envelope that you've got to work within. Fire regs efficiencies, all those sort of things. It's sort of, when I was doing public housing in Singapore, it's sort of like straight away I thought, a computer could do this.
Right.
MVRDV did that really good project just in the western suburbs of Amsterdam. I can't remember the name of the area, but where they joked about the fact that you couldn't fit it all in. So they end up with these apartments that just cantilever out from the slab block, And it was a commentary on the fact that the parameters are impossible. Something's got to give. And ultimately, usually the architect is stepping in, and all the changes and negotiations and meetings are about, well, what's going to yield here? There's a floor space ratio. Where are we going to break the envelope? Yeah.
I think it's I get the point that you're making. It's an interesting one. I mean, so much of our lives now are more in the practicing of architecture and the profession of architecture, meaning to say that I these days I have more and more distance away from the academic kind of realm. And, what's funny is that, and I know you know this, that when all of your colleagues and friends and people that you speak with are practicing professionals, the conversations revolve around, the same half a dozen not very fun, boring shit, just complaining about codes and budgets and all this stuff. And I think that I've had this suspicion for a while that as the industry becomes more complex, as buildings become more complex, as the code book gets thicker and as everything becomes thicker, right? It's easy. I'm not saying this is okay. I'm not saying maybe it's a cop out, but I think it's easy for a lot of architects who once had the vision that you're describing when they were in school or right after school for it to just kind of eviscerate because they're just trying to get through. And frankly, I think all of us as a species of architects have good stamina, but there's a limit for a lot of folks, I feel like. And I think that might be part of it. In addition to what you said of like maybe also being a little bit afraid to poke the bear.
Yeah, I think the point that you've made is probably stronger. The fear and that reticence is something I was probably more conscious of in universities because all the scholarship was post-structuralist, influenced by Derrida and Deleuze and Guattari and all of these people who were basically just saying give up. It's hate to typecast him in that way. So
Is
that
there
was
also
the academic conversation. But yes, in practice, I
right?
mean, friends of mine in practice, my one of my best friends at the moment, the one I just referred to with the apartment buildings, yeah, he's just dying under the weight of details. So
Is there I feel like, so I'm not an architecture historian at all, and I did not do great in history class. Now I wish I'd paid attention because I find it really fascinating. At the time, though, I was obsessed with studio, so I would fall asleep in other classes. So that's just some context for what I'm about to say. But I feel like there's a period of time where there were architects that were putting out visionary work or paper work, right, and writings and conceptual things, and I feel like also after that period, there's maybe some pushback within the study, or maybe from the outside as well, of saying like, well, you guys are just making up shit with no responsibility, especially when we get to whatever decade when sustainability becomes a big part of the conversation, and you have all these architects or academics or students, whoever, who are dreaming up these fantastic quote sustainable cities and buildings, but there's really no actual science or proof that this stuff works. So anyway, that's a one specific example, but I feel like there's a period where there's some pushback because it's like, again, the perception was that architects were just having fun, but not being serious enough. Is that part of like what occurred?
yeah, I mean, the examples that you're pointing toward there are probably too fresh to comment on. I mean, the beautiful thing about architectural history is that it gives you this critical distance. So, if you want to talk about Ledoux doing that, or go right back and talk about Alberti or Palladio's treatises or something. They're doing exactly that. Like they're having fun. But I mean, with a far enough prism, to look back on in time at those things. I mean, it's the joy of architecture as well. So, maybe not look at the fresh ones because that can be prickly, like what's this bastard doing getting paid to dream and fantasize, working in a university and just, having us all on. I mean, that could chagrin anybody. But at the same time, that the joy of architecture and the discussion and the ideas that float around it and the utopian or platonic dreaming that goes along with it. I mean, that's the fun. That's the stuff that if we get together as architects and have a beer and a laugh or just, really enjoy it. And I found this when I led study tours that, you don't care that Alberti was in the pocket of Medici. I mean, if you were back in the day, you might have wanted to kill the bastard. Why is he getting this great work, with his bullshit? Sorry.
Right.
But now if you look back, you go, what wonderful ideas. And also more than that, it's a kind of a snapshot of society at the time, like you can see the dynamics of the Renaissance when you look at those treatises and those stories. And I'm sure that historians in the future will be able to look back and look at nonsense and discussions and things that happen now and say, wow, what a snapshot. That was what concerned people at that time in history. Um, I mean, it's been a while since I've flagged this particular theory, but I often think that architectural theory, or the words that surround architecture, actually the words that we use to sell it to the clients, um,
Hmm.
you're looking at people who are just about to go into massive debt. They're shelling out a fortune for something that's going to hurt them economically. To have this architecture, something other than bare bones building.
Hmm.
Um, so, what words are going to get them over the line and make them feel as though, yes, this is really worth it? I think those words in themselves are a snapshot of the highest aspirations of the time. Political slogans are just to get voters who are sitting in the middle across to one side. But I think architectural sales pitches or rhetoric really are, you know, yeah, pretty. I guess I spent a lot of my career like researching and writing about the words of architects.
Hmm.
So I do see those sales pitches as a crude way of saying it.
Hmm.
But a classic one, I think probably the best one ever would be "God is in the Details" by Mies van der
Right.
Rohe, and I think it's attributed to other people as well. But just say he popularized it. So, I mean, a very short sentence there, but you think of how that's appealing to you know. Particularly, when he moves to America, post-war America, it's a very religious um,
Hmm.
culture that he's moved to. And you can see how that would, yeah, Edith Farnsworth, I'm going to pass you all my money for something I can't even live in because God's in the
I saw
details.
I saw in the details,
The
not these
more you have
details though.
details, the more you
Details
you
somewhere
have them.
else. I saw it a thing on Instagram. I don't know if it's true or not. You might know
Hmm.
that. I guess we've seen the Farnsworth that he sued the client and the client sued back, and something like about during the lawsuit, the roof started leaking.
Right.
Like, I guess that relationship was pretty tense.
Yeah. Well, come on. She um she fancied him. This was the so you think you think how many of them are there? The Schroeder House, Gerrit
Hmm.
Rietveld, you
Hmm.
know, there's a lot of architects have used their charisma, and they're not even good looking blokes. Like, I mean, Louis Kahn is ugly as hell. And
He's better looking than Mies, I think.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
good point.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's something, and I've seen it. I've seen it here. It's a common thread with architects who do this thing, especially with residential architecture. But they just um, charm women clients. There's so many of them,
It's such a weird thing.
and the doctor husband's left paying for it all.
Meanwhile, he knows exactly what's going on. That's the twist. Um,
Maybe they're
but
helping each other.
it is. What's that?
Maybe they're helping each other out.
It is kind of an odd thing, though. I mean, when we talk about these types of people like Louis Kahn, Corbusier, Mies,
Hmm.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we all, a lot of, I don't know what school life is like these days, but we all studied them in school and kind of revered their projects. And just the other week, I was thinking kind of out loud, like, but and again, through the lens of more of a practicing architect, like, yeah, the work is really interesting and there's a lot to be said about it
Yeah,
because they wrote about it, right? But also, mostly I'm like, but there's something about, like, how do they get the commission to do that? And what was that client relationship like? I feel like there's a whole side, a large part of the story that's just not really talked about so much in school, even after school. We just talk about the building and the philosophy of it.
You can talk about that experience in school because no one would want to be an architect.
Well, maybe. Well, unless they want to hook up with doctors' wives. But like, I just like I feel like there's a lot more to that scene and that time, to what allowed this thing to take place, that is on, like, not to dismiss the work that's going on now, but I'm mostly impressed by architects getting commissions and less impressed by their work that they're doing, frankly. And I have a feeling that some of that applies to even the greats.
Well, I can talk with authority about Louis Kahn's commission in Rochester, because for the PhD I did a deep dive with that, and I also went to Rochester, interviewed people, got into the office correspondence at both sides, so Kahn's correspondence and their correspondence, so the correspondence back and forth. Somewhere buried in my CV is a publication I did about the way he used game theory, a game theory analysis of his relationship with that client and what he did. So they wanted Frank Lloyd Wright to do the commission. So he'd already done the Unity Temple, a Unitarian church. His own father was a Unitarian minister. And he was clearly really famous. So they went to Wright. Wright didn't have time for it. So Kahn they went to Kahn afterward, and so he got the commission. But of course, Kahn felt that they wanted something like the Unity Temple, which was a simple building. It's a school and a church and an entry vestibule that links the two. So the Unitarians have their own schools. So he sensed that they wanted him to do that. And of course, he didn't want to be under Wright's shadow. He wanted to come out as his own architect. So he had this idea of wrapping the school around the church, which would have made the school 10 times bigger. They didn't have the budget for such a big school that would wrap all the way around the church at the centre. But that's what he wanted to do, and he played a game of attrition with them. So he got enough work and enough fees from them. He did enough work and got enough fees from them that they had skin in the game now. It would have cost them to sack him and go with somebody else. They would have been back to square one, and they would have lost face, the church building committee. So he kept them on a drip feed for ages. I can't remember the time frame, but it might have been, there were gaps of like 6 months between letters when he was just letting them go.
What?
And just drawing them out to the point where he just had them over a barrel. And ultimately, they just had to come to the party and rustle up the finances for a much bigger building than they ever wanted. Still not as big as his Ambit claim that he was stepping forward with. At the same time, he was writing about this idea of the form. It's got to be true to the form. And he kept using that example of the school wrapped around the church for the form of any Unitarian church, wherever it might exist in the world. And doing it with these, quasi-Platonic, highfalutin philosophical overtones that would appeal to, Unitarians and appeal to the culture of that time that was quite religious. And interestingly, when he went to India, he was talking in terms that made him sound like a Hindu guru. So he was a chameleon. But I mean, it was to get the job, and this is the really cool thing about archival history as well, is that you're not in there, looking at a lot of correspondence about the great ideas, you're not there reading God is in the details in all of Mises' correspondence. Not that I've read Mises, but I mean, you're reading the day-to-day argy-bargy with clients and authorities, the stuff that architects now know about. But so you're 100% right. I mean, it is about getting the job. It's about and those sort of signature commissions that architects win the prizes for and get famous for and get published with. I mean, the guys, sometimes the girls, the architects who get those jobs, I mean, they're working they're working 24/7 on getting the job. The design work, they flip to a bunch of unpaid interns, but getting the job is the yeah. Hats off.
I've
I
also
think it's
always
amazing.
wondered. I've also always wondered, and I don't know if you have an answer or maybe like a hypothesis on this, but for some of these, I love that you highlighted the sales pitch. I think that's what you called it, like to the client or to the general public.
Yeah.
Which is also funny because that particular phrase, a lot of architects who are dressed in black turtlenecks would be like, ugh, I don't like that word. But, in effect, that is a big part of what we have to do as a service industry. But anyway, what I was going to say is I've always wondered, the writings by these architects, the speeches they give, the lectures they give, and how much of it truly is what they believe versus how much of it is they know it's going to have the effect they want it to have.
Marketing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, look, I think they've all drank the Kool-Aid. They all believe their own sales pitch. I think, okay, so this is going back so years ago, 2001, I had the opportunity of organising the first Glenn Murcutt Masterclass. So he just won the Pritzker Prize. And the head of school where I was, forged a relationship with Glenn, said, Glenn, let's put together a masterclass. And I got the job of making it all happen. And and it meant that I spent a fair bit of time, working with him in the preparation and then, of course, delivering the masterclass and things like that. And I mean, Glenn lives and this is his whole life, he is totally immersed in it. And it's a very difficult guy to just enjoy dinner with because and then, there are at the same masterclass, there's Rick LaPlastria and Pete Stutchbury, two other prominent Australian architects who have really, their own profile rose through the association, the friendship with Glenn. And, these are guys who can sort of let their hair down and stop thinking about it for a while. But again, once they switch on, I mean, they're difficult people. When you work in a university, they're difficult people to engage as tutors because, so as an architectural historian, like I'm style-wise ambivalent, I think all the styles I don't believe in any of them. I think they're all, reflections of societal attitudes and which themselves are all, contestable. But and so when a student comes to me with its design in a style, whatever it might be, they might come to me with a building and they're influenced by Japanese metabolism. Well, I won't tell them metabolism is wrong. I'll say, well, okay, these are the rules of metabolism. Let's go for it. You want to do metabolism, do metabolism. And or of course, these guys are, they're always batting. They're so ardent believers in, raw timber and skillion roofs and floating glass and stuff like that.
Right.
And it's like, well, so they're great if you're in a big enough school, that students can choose to go and do that person's studio and learn in the manner of them and be their proteges, a masterclass model, then great. But the two schools where I've been employed full time has been small schools where students haven't had the choice. So it's very hard to have people as tutors who are either people like that or they're acolytes who just only want to pursue one style. And I mean, I'm a pluralist. I think if a student wants to design in the manner of a Hindu Gopuram, they can do it,
Yeah, that sounds cool, actually. That's an interesting point. I mean, I was fortunate that the undergraduate school I went to was pretty large. So each year there were like maybe half a dozen different studios to choose from, or teachers rather. Sometimes you didn't always get a choice. It was, whatever the school system was for signing you up for this and that class. But
Yeah.
there's always like half a dozen. A lot of times they're very different from each other, and the studios were a big number of people in there, so just a lot of like opportunity to see and try different things. And actually, when I look back, one of the things I used to tell students when I taught was, and the thing that I wish I knew when I was in school, especially in the undergraduate level, is to take some pressure off of yourself and role play. Like, you don't have to say, because this studio project is going to be done in the metabolist, mindset or whatever other kind of manner of, that is the end all be all. Like, just roll with it, role play, learn. Yeah. And then after you do, 5 years of studio, then you can look back and say, okay, like there's bits and pieces of these things I like. Yep. And I always found it a bit, I think there's something to be learned from all teachers, but I always find it quite annoying when I personally had teachers who were, like you said, acolytes. I'm like, yeah, but your critique it might be valid in the larger question of what is architecture, but I'm just a student trying to learn, and it's actually not helpful when you just dismiss everything I'm trying to do. There's nothing for me to learn from, right? Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah. No, look, I do. The reason I started the Instagram reels that you've seen, and that's how you've approached me, is that at the time I was doing a fair bit of online tutoring with students who were going through exactly these dilemmas. So, students who were studying design studio, being asked to be creative, to come in with something, and then just sort of getting absolutely confounded with conflicting advice and sort of very vague words that could all be dismissed, and just show them a picture of the building they want them to copy and that it be done. So, I think it is particularly cruel. Like, I mean, the example that you're talking about there, where at least you had the choice of different studios, so you can only blame yourself for choosing the wrong one, although you might not have had all that much of a choice. But at least in that scenario, you can say, we're wearing the hat of that architect. We're designing in that manner. And that's a great way to learn. I mean, Bjarke Ingels talks about the fact that, he really was a protege of various architects before he came to the point of having his own thing. And Louis Kahn, he was a Le Corbusier acolyte. Like, I think it is the right way to go, is to fully understand, the way an architect thinks before you can actually come up with your own uniqueness. But the particular problem in small schools of architecture is that, on the one hand, students are asked to be conceptual and have their own idea that they're going to push through, and then they're just going to be tortured for having that idea. And I mean, that's why I always enjoyed being the architectural historian who was running studios, that I could just straight away recognize, 3 or 4 different movements or styles or trends from the past that particular student was sort of heading towards, and I could steer them into that so they could go and wear that suit, at least try it on. And so, I mean, then you get a diversity of different styles that come out of the studio. And anyway, that always sat well with me. I liked teaching that way.
It's interesting with so let's talk about your Instagram reels, which are really, there's a lot these days now. There's a lot of architecture accounts, and everyone's posting this and that and whatever. But I thought yours were really succinct, well scripted. If you write them in advance, I assume you do, and actually provide some. There's some humor in there for sure. You're not afraid. You don't pull punches, I don't think. Although maybe you do. maybe what I'm saying is actually a lesser version of what you actually think. I don't know. I think they're great. And now a quick break to thank the sponsors who support the second studio. Are you tired of juggling multiple pieces of software and struggling with spreadsheets that aren't made for the realities of design and architecture in 2023? Built by and for designers and architects, Programma's all-in-one suite of tools has everything modern studios need for every stage of a project. Mood boards, the world's best specification tools, procurement tracking, project management, and more. All smartly integrated and easily shareable and always up to date, reducing time-consuming double handling and costly errors. Share work in various formats from PDFs to client-friendly, up-to-date online dashboards. Join the ranks of leading studios using Programma today. Click the Programma link in our show notes to start for free. Dear architects, design leaders, and founders redefining the industry, if you want to shape not only buildings, but the business behind them, this is your moment. Future London Academy's Executive MBA takes you inside the boardrooms of Pentagram, Uber, Zaha Hadid Architects, and Google, where you'll master finance, strategy, and operations from the people who already excel at them. Study along peers transforming the industry worldwide and do it all in just 9 intensive weeks over 1 year between London and California. The program is award-winning, transformative, and crafted for design and architecture leaders with 15 or more years of experience. If you're ready to grow your impact, apply now by tapping the Future London Academy link in our show notes.
This episode is brought to you by Chaos. They make award-winning design and visualization tools, and they're really pushing the boundaries with AI. Now, AI is shaking up the architecture and design world, and Chaos is taking a responsible approach. Their tools are built to help architects, designers, and visualization specialists to work faster and explore more ideas without replacing creativity. Basically, Chaos wants AI to make your imagination stronger, not take over. So you get to design with more freedom, create stunning visuals, and stay in control of your work. If you want to see what that looks like, tap the Chaos link in our show notes.
But also, like, you're not afraid to be self-critical of either the profession, some of the folks we idolize, or the academic realm. And I'm curious, I guess, in the school setting, if you could tell us, what are the I don't know, top 3 or just a few of the pet peeves you have or the things you see that just you don't feel is right.
Yep. Very.
Or is it a list of 10?
The first one that comes to mind, very few design studio teachers are prepared to talk about style. And it is very hard to talk about. So they sort of eschew the issue and they'll come up with these convoluted briefs that are all about function. And then even ask students to be conceptual with their first line on paper about planning. There was this, what was the name of this project? There was this project in Berlin. There was this whole redevelopment area in Berlin, and Peter Eisenman, Leon Krier, and Aldo Rossi, the 3 most famous ones that were brought in. And they all did these housing developments in this area in Berlin all around the same time. If you look at the plans, they pretty much all settled on perimeter blocks, simple, very simple planning structures. All the plans ostensibly are more or less the same. There's nothing stand out about the plans. All of them were leading theorists at the time. All of their theorists were about architecture as a language that speaks through the facade to the public on the outside. All of the facade treatments are radically different and talk and really speak to their theory, and what they were about as architects. And how often do you see a design studio project, Ren, where students are going around in circles and they've got their tutors still at the 11th hour talking about their goddamn plan during the quiz, looking at the plan, a computer's going to draw this plan for people within the next 5 years. Planning is the easy bit. Any architect can get the planning done, recast the plan straight away. And so students are bogged down in the plan and sometimes the form as though this is their contribution to the world. And the whole time it's really because my colleagues are afraid to talk about style, because it's tricky. It's tricky to do. It's the hard part.
Wait, let me ask real quick. When you say
Yeah,
style,
yeah.
because style is this word that also, I don't know, just mean a lot of different things. Do you, like, what would be some examples of style? Do you mean like modern versus deconstructivist versus postmodern versus a bunch of blobitecture versus blah, 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 blah? Or is style meaning something else that I'm
That's
not
one way
grasping?
of looking at it. I think if you look at a lot of, contemporary buildings, another way of looking at it is just to say, look, I've got this palette of materials and I've established these rules for the way I'm going to handle them. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing that because there is some message I'm trying to say this. And you can even leave out that last bit. But
Hmm.
so and it can come down to, expression of structure and different things like that. So, throughout 20th century history, at least, there are a whole heap of relevant movements and styles, and you can tap into any of those, or you can make up your own rules. But I mean, that's where the real the real joy of it is. I've chosen these materials. I'm using them this way. I'm using brick in a truthful manner like Khan, or as a veneer. The way the way Frank Gehry might do. And but these are the rules, and this is what I'm sticking to, and this is why I'm doing it. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it seems like a fairly effete conversation, but I mean, that's where architecture is. That's what it's about at the end of the day. When you go and apprehend the building, um, you're not really seeing the plan. You're just trusting that a professional is going to optimize that, and it wouldn't be built if it wasn't fairly optimal. Um,
Yeah.
but where the architect has volition and where no one can get in our face, is when we start talking about details, material selection, the way to
Right.
use the
Yeah.
rules
Right.
that we establish for fenestration and what all that
Yeah.
means. We have complete volition there. No one's going to argue with because they don't know and they kind of don't care. So,
Yeah. You're right. Right. Yeah.
But
Okay. Yeah. I get what you're saying now for sure.
yeah, that's true.
This,
And I think it's, I mean, I think it is the hardest thing to teach, right? It's like
you got to know how to do it.
how to actually, like, what is the building going to look like is a
Yeah.
very important question. Like, the plan is one thing, and you're right, and you're going to feel it as you move through the space and whatever. But what is it going to look like from the street?
yeah,
And teaching that to people, and teaching in a way that, when they come out of school, they can design things that look beautiful, and building that have an impact is the hardest thing.
It would be.
yeah,
I mean, I remember in school, the facade of the building was always the thing that would come last. Like, you have
yeah,
to kind of like whip it out last minute to like have, those four
That's what he's saying,
elevations they
yeah.
always
Yeah.
ask, and like come up with a cool idea. Never thought about how it's actually going to work.
yeah,
But it's something you have to have in your deliverables. And actually, when you're in practice, you're designing a building or a home, the facade is the hardest part to design,
yeah,
and it takes practice. So if you could practice,
this,
while you're in
yeah.
school and learning from your teachers who are experts at doing those things, like that is crucial.
They got to be experts at doing those things. I mean,
Well, that is the thing.
I think it's interesting too. I had this thought the other day from one of the projects we're doing because we're looking at this floor plan and the client keeps wanting to tweak it, and at some point we tell clients like we gotta move past this because this is not the end all be all. This is just like one tiny layer to everything else.
yeah,
But also, I think it's interesting for maybe students or anyone to realize like a floor plan can be executed a million different ways in reality in 3D, like to your point with the housing in Berlin. But it's just. I had this thought the other week too, and let me know if this is also sort of in line with what you're saying or not. But when I look back on school, one of the critiques I have was like so much of the emphasis of let's say the value of the architecture that we're producing and whether or not it's good or not, and whether we get praise from teachers and critics and whatever else, is like, the big concept, which I'm a big believer in the value of that for sure, but also kind of like a generic, and I'm just a specific example, but like a generic box that gets lopped off and this and that side and twisted, and it produces this kind of form, but there's absolutely no discussion of detail, material, or anything but it's validated because of these diagrams we've done and this fancy lecture, and that's where it all stops. Like all the education kind of like stops there, and no one in the critiques that I ever had dives into, I think, what you're describing. And it's weird when I think about it now. I'm like, we never talked about this stuff. It was always about the first, when in reality, what we do with the school is this only like the first 10% of an actual project, in terms of the design phases even.
Yeah. Look, I think the reason is that not very many architectural educators can do it. Now, I got better at it, not because I was ever good in practice. Like, anything I've designed is rubbish. I'll freely admit. I'm not a practicing architect. I was hopeless at style and fenestration as a student. All the things that you've been saying. But it was through teaching the other styles and really having to drill in and understand, okay, how do you do that style, So it was very popular here in Australia was to emulate Glenn Murcutt's floating roofs, with the outriggers holding the wrinkle tin right out to the edge. How do you actually physically do that, and how's it detailed so that it looks good? And then there are some others who are actually really good practicing architects who have nutted this out in their own practice, and they come in and work in schools. And so I had two colleagues who were really good at that. And they might have only known their own styles, but they were very good at articulating them and helping students achieve that. And so you can see there's a certain percentage of architectural educators who do that. But I mean, in fairness, a lot of other people just amble back in to the university scene through all sorts of weird back doors, and the classic old expression, those who can't do teach, and they end up there as like third authors on papers written in other schools about other disciplines and things like that. So on paper, they're contributing to the university's research quantum. They're they're very good just doing it, upward managing, doing what the people above them want. There's an awful lot of nepotism, and an awful lot of nepotism in universities generally, and especially in architecture schools. I worked in a school where in the staff room, half the people had the same last name. So, there's an awful lot of that, and it's so easy just to employ your squeeze as a research assistant and tutor. There's no scrutiny over that. So so you end up with a lot of people sitting around the crit and working as tutors because they've got to be given work while they're in there, teaching work as well as the research and administrative work they're mainly employed to do. So they end up in the design studio, and they probably shouldn't really be there. It's not their bag, and so these are the sort of people who sitting there in a crit, they'll just look at the stairs, they'll look back at the brief and go, the brief asked for a storeroom of 20 square meters. Well, who cares?
That's the easy way to do critique. The easy way to do a critique. I totally understand what you're saying. So are you still teaching these days? No,
2015 I left academia. So
what?
Yeah. I had some books.
It's been a minute.
Sorry?
It's been a minute then.
A minute? Come on, it's 10 years. It's 11 years. So my passion was cycling. I was always a bicycle racer. And then I lived in the city, and it was difficult to park a car on the street. So got rid of the car and was raising the family with a cargo bike and doing that sort of thing. And around about the same time, New York put in bike lanes, and all the cities around the world were thinking, what's this with bike lanes? New York's just done it. This needs to be on our agenda. So suddenly the bicycle modal share became a target for cities around the world. We need to get it from 2% to 4%. They had these sort of arbitrary things. Well, I started a blog, and this is in 2010. I started a blog about bicycling and architecture, thinking there must be something there. So 2011, I got a book deal to put out this book called Cycle Space with NAI 010, so the Dutch publishers, the Netherlands Architecture Institute's publishers. So, they published Cool House and MBRDV trying to think of the other one, Herman Hertzberger, these people. So I had this really cool book deal with these guys, and I put this book out called Cycle Space, which was just really timely. So before I knew it, I went from being sort of like just, run of the mill lecturer in a university, with a few executive positions like a company man, to getting all these invitations to go and speak at, National Institute of Architects conferences and be a plenary and keynote speaker and these things. So I started doing that, and it kind of started to snowball. I started to get a lot of press. Um, Atlantic Cities and the Guardian and all of these places. And so then University of Tasmania, the head of school down there really liked all of that. So I went to work down there, and I had an opportunity to run design studios that were just about bicycling futures. That led to a follow-up book that was all about, you know, as architects, what would we do hypothetically if, if cities were organized around if bicycle transport, and would
Mm-hmm.
that be better? And what would it
Mm-hmm.
really look like? And I had all of these students and all their imaginations thrown at this. So we were looking at all sorts of things like undulating ground planes and spiraling buildings that, you know, the would really maximize shorten trip times, do all this cool stuff. So I came out with a second book. Anyway, I had the opportunity and I took it. I was just getting so many of these speaking invitations. I just took a couple of years, and I was making my living as a keynote speaker primarily, but also producing reports, helping property developers, just doing all sorts of things, anything that came up, because I had this kind of cool nexus that was working. And man, it was great. I lived the life of Riley there. And then, I mean, my second book was more, it was deeper, not so easy to pick up and skim through. And
Mm.
it just didn't catch on quite as much. And and the other thing that was happening as well is that the rise of the e-bike. So suddenly
Oh
everyone
yeah.
was thinking about e-bikes, and all of my work was really, it was lent towards the poor, people who couldn't afford that. Um,
Mm.
and so I felt myself getting marginalized a little bit, and COVID sort of was the last nail in the coffin. So when you're making your money going to other cities, and went
Yeah.
to, like, Bogota was a great gig. You know, China, all these international projects where you're flying in, you're getting shown around, you're giving a big talk, you're sitting in high level government meetings, and they're picking your brains. And in each meeting, you're bringing what you've learned from the other cities that you've been to as well. And it all starts
Mm.
to accumulate and snowball, but it also depends on being there. So COVID was pretty much the end of that. I was not a very good manager of myself either. I didn't have like a good business partner who would line up the next work and all of that. So I was an academic. Everything always just came to me. So when it wasn't just coming to me, I
Right.
wasn't very good at pursuing the work. So yeah, COVID put the kibosh on the whole thing. And you don't want to know what I did next. During COVID, I went and I retrained, and went into a fashion school, and and
What?
started tailoring arty farty highfalutin luxury swimwear.
Oh
Really?
what? Wow.
Yeah, and doing all the
Wait, so
photography.
how do you decide to pursue
That's
that at all?
yeah. How did you decide to
I think
pivot
a
like
lot of
that?
people flipped out during COVID, right? And it's
Yeah,
just
that's true.
and it's just like, you know what? I've just had enough of all of it. I've just I'm I've done it. You know, I, the passion's not there anymore. and
Mm.
there were no jobs going. I mean, schools of architecture were in a bad way at the time, so there was no prospect of going and getting work in any of those. They were all just in survival mode and
Mm.
doing online teaching and stuff like that. So I went and did this, and I mean, it's kept me busy. I've had a great time with it for quite a few years, but just recently I've thought. Um, I'm always one to sort of move forward with things, to go on and do different things. And so, I mean, I think I'm going to really enjoy this, but right now I'm retraining to be a high school design teacher. And there are different ways that you can take that as well. Um, I mean, when I was when I've been tutoring, I still do, tutoring. I'm always available as an online tutor, and that keeps me my hand in with architecture schools and what's going on there. So I'm always reading, the latest briefs that are coming across the desks, and you know, sort of mentoring students, through the
Hmm.
design studio mainly, sometimes technical, you know, projects as well. But I see there, and I saw as a lecturer as well, that if you've got a student who wasn't told as a 12-year-old that your ideas are fantastic, you're a creative genius, whatever you do is amazing, just back yourself and go through with it. And it can be as mad as you like, because also living in liberal democracies, we value difference. It's a symbol of what we stand for in liberal democracies, the individual.
Mm.
So if someone from age 12 hasn't been told, we really value your quirkiness, your individuality, pursue it, and we're going to give you high marks. Um, when you meet them as an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old in university, and this is people coming from non-liberal democratic countries where it's top down, you do what the master tells you, or
Hmm.
it's people who, thanks to their schooling, just not having a good art or design teacher in school, have just
Hmm.
always thought that you've got to do what the teacher says, that you're converging on the teacher's predetermined answer.
Hmm.
They're just going to struggle as designers. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to. I'll start off local, getting into schools. But I mean, when I was an academic, we were doing a lot of. You'd go on these recruitment trips. So you'd go, Singapore, Malaysia, wherever you were recruiting your international students from, and you'd go into a lot of really interesting schools. Um, you know, very, very selective, full scholarship schools and real hothouse schools and things like that. And I'd love to find myself back in one of those where you're working with students from like age 12. I think that's like a key
Hmm.
turning point,
Hmm.
um, developmentally, where you're really capturing people. And it won't just be architecture, but of course, given my background, it might just all be architecture. um,
I was gonna
um,
ask. You said design course or design something. I was wondering if it was what the specific, if there was gonna be a specific topic, or is there a generic design course that's common, where you are for
or
high school students?
the bigger the school, the more specialization and the more choice and opportunity for that sort of thing.
Right.
In Australia, it's called design and technology, but it is, if you look at the syllabus, and this is pretty universal, it's there's a spot in the high school curriculum for design thinking. And so,
Hmm.
you can apply that to vacuum cleaners or houses or city plans. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's very flexible, but it is about design processes and methods. And
Is this
yeah,
sorry? Is this for public schools or private schools
uh,
or
whatever.
really?
I'm not sure. I mean, to really do what I want to do, I would probably end up in selective private scholarship schools,
Right.
something like that, or really, really big schools with enough room for specialization. But it, I mean, in one sense, it doesn't really matter. It's more me reflecting on what I can do as a teacher. And really, for the first time in my life, because when you're an educator in the university system, you're not taught how to be an educator. You just, there's
This
no
is
training.
true.
There's no training in
Yeah, no,
pedagogy.
you just get you just get hired
Yeah, yeah. You get
because you
hired
know
on the.
somebody. You have the same last name as someone.
There's a lot of that. There is, like in my case, it was because I did a PhD and then networked and just found myself going into the university. I never planned to become an architectural educator when I was doing the PhD anyway. I always thought go back to Singapore and work in policy there. So, but
Hmm.
yeah, to actually think about what you're doing as an educator. I'm just really enjoying that at the moment. But I mean, life throws you all sorts of different curveballs, and it's nice to. Oh, I guess we're having a fireside chat here. I'm 58 now, and when you've left and had a consulting career, and it was fantastic, and then it was nothing, and when you've had one or two health scares and things like that, and your kids grow up and stuff. It's like you really don't care about a lot of things. You just you're just so happy to be alive, and you
Right.
switch. I just recently did a volunteer mission in northern Thailand in these hill tribe schools and temple schools and teaching creativity to little to monks. So
That's
and
wild.
and refugees, orphans coming across from Myanmar and things. So I mean, there's just so many when like financially you're comfortable enough, when you don't have the mortgage hanging over your head anymore and you're unencumbered, and you realize that life is precious. I mean, this is a luxurious position that I'm in, admittedly,
Hmm.
and I'm not making a fortune, like I mean, I'm not picking career paths that I had to once, when I was younger and had to pay off the house and raise the kids and all of those things. Um,
Hmm.
and I guess in some respects, the biggest fear for me is that I'll end up back in academia because as I'm doing these things, I'm thinking about what is it about 12 young teenage monks who live in each other's pockets constantly and why they can solve a design task as a group so quickly. I mean, I saw that and it was almost like magic. And then you start thinking of, design problems or how could you bring this to committees? You get these committees where everyone's got their axe to grind and they're getting nowhere.
Hmm.
So many planning and design decisions are solved by committees, Um,
Yeah.
and here's a committee of 12 who just came up with the solution so quickly. So yeah, that's and to actually reflect on education itself, like what it is to learn and theories of learning, the that you learn as part of teacher training and probably forget as soon as you get out there. But I mean, it's as someone who has for most of their career been an architectural educator, been an educator, it's really good finally to go back and actually think from first principles about what's happening in the mind of a learner,
Right.
and how that actually happens, and it just purely happens by accidents in universities. Yeah.
Yeah, it does happen for sure, but it's not. It's not a requirement, and there's not even a lot of discussion about it. I found. I think maybe again a lot of the teachers that I've witnessed had or co-taught with or were adjacent to, their focus again was so much on the work. And actually, kind of going back,
Mm,
one of my own critiques of a lot of the academic settings was that the teachers were too preoccupied with the work, which sounds weird, but
mm,
I mean to say that they're not even thinking about the student at all.
yeah.
Like Do you think that what you're saying is registering with them? Is it helping them, or are you just going to critique the object on the desk? Because any architect can do that, but that's not really your job, actually, right? Your job is to help train the person, and that's also, by the way, I think the idea of an architecture tutor is really fascinating to me to kind of supplement maybe some of that.
Yeah, look, we'll circle back to the one about the private tuition. I think what you're talking about there in architecture school, I mean, it's good. It works as an educational model. So it's problem-based learning. You've got a project there, and very often you'll get studios where, um, actually for a research project, I floated around different schools of architecture in New York during a sabbatical, and sat in on sessions. They're all open. I was doing a sabbatical in the Department of Philosophy at Columbia, so I had the Columbia card. I could walk into their studios, for example. So here's
Cool.
Bernard Schumi at Columbia running a studio. He's got a project in Dubai. He's actually got a project on his desk that he's doing, and he's running that project as a studio. Either that project or that project thinly veiled as a studio in Colombia. And he's doing it. It's a great idea because he wants to solve this problem, and he's got 40, 50 students there whose imaginations are going to be thrown at it as well. And of course, he's going to see ideas coming from their heads that he can make part of his own work, And that's not plagiarism. That's just sort of like a brainstorming session that you're all doing together. So educationally, what's happening is that the students are getting problem-based learning. They're also working in what's called the zone of proximal development. So they're working on the same project as him. He knows a bit more than them. In some ways, they don't know things that he doesn't know, So it's like a 3-year-old learning from a 5-year-old. The 5-year-old's going ahead, but the 3-year-old will learn more from a 5-year-old than they will from an adult who's just lecturing them. These are the facts.
Right.
So working in the sandpit together with a master it's a great way to learn. So, I mean, accidentally, architectural education is very good a lot of the time. It's one of the best educations you can get because it is so involved. And they might be bad motivations or not pure motivations, but the teachers you're learning from are motivated. So it's all the things that are wrong that no one actually picks up because there aren't any theories of education. There aren't any educationists in there pointing the finger going, you can't do that,
Right. So does this mean like right now or recently you've been taking courses to learn how to teach and educate 12-year-olds?
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
That's so cool.
I'm doing a Masters of Education, a Masters of Teaching secondary degree. I'm doing at the moment. Yeah. About to go into high school.
That's really cool. Yeah,
First
I think
time
that's
I've
really
stepped foot in
cool.
high school since 1986. That's about to happen.
That's probably a little weird, a little bit different.
Probably iPad instead of ink pens. And,
Yeah.
I've heard. Yeah.
I think that's really cool, though. I mean, I also would agree with what you said about, if you have an individual who is brought up to they're not encouraged to embrace their own ideas, their thinking, or whatever the other scenario would be, that when they transition to first day of studio, first week of studio in a design school, architecture school, whatever, design school, it's brutal for them. That's mostly the problem that young students have, is that they, and I saw it a little bit over the years where I feel like the first year students started to change in general, and the change was that they were becoming more and more, that transition was becoming worse, harder for them, and that they would show up and they were expecting more and more to be told exactly what to do. It's step by step to arrive at a solution that I approve as a teacher and therefore get a good grade. And at some point I realized this is not, you guys have the completely wrong idea of like what we're doing here. And I feel like that dissonance, that challenge was increasing over the years, because I suspect that a lot of the education during the formative years that you described of 12 to 17 are in some ways becoming more prescribed, a prescribed way of learning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know about your situation there. In Australia, they brought in national standard testing to rank all of the schools. And
Yep.
so a lot of classroom time is being dedicated to preparing students for these standardized tests.
Yeah.
And it's
It's the
all,
same here.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's you can only teach convergent thinking. It's mainly on maths and, reading comprehension and things like that. So you're teaching students how to find the right answer, and whereas design thinking is really about doggedly pursuing the wrong answer.
Actually, that's an interesting way of putting it, and then putting it out there and then being told it's wrong and being like, okay, I guess I'll just retry.
No, just doing it
and
anyway.
retry.
I mean,
Yeah.
you look at Norman Foster's Inside Out convention, patently wrong. High-tech architecture, you're going to take everything that belongs in the core of the building and put it outside the building, and then put the occupants on the inside where they can't see out of the building. That is just crazy. It's a crazy idea. And it's high-tech architecture. It's one of the greatest movements of the late 20th century. So, and it's exactly the sort of thing that you should be doing as a student. Glenn Murcutt conceiving a building as a box gutter.
Right.
So, I mean, these are crazy, I'm trying to think of he died during COVID. I can't remember his name now, the New York architectural critic. He just talked about this sort of boneheaded insistence on wrong ideas, being really.
You're not referring to Michael Sorkin, are you?
Yes. Thank you.
Really?
Yeah.
I had him as a teacher.
Sorry?
Yeah, I had him as a teacher.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
He's a cool guy. Yeah, sure. He was a really cool guy. Yeah, I miss him.
He floors me. Like, I mean, he's him and Charles Jenks, but him in particular. I mean, what he wrote about architecture, I mean, that's what I aspire to, just to be so, such a straight shooter, so clear and so funny, and that sort of New York journalism hyperbolic style that he would write in. I mean, no.
Yeah, he was a phenomenal writer. I liked what I liked about him as well is that his writing was for the most part like very accessible.
Yeah.
Even though it was incredibly like nuanced, it was still very accessible. And then as a person, he was just a lot of fun to be around.
I can imagine.
He was kind of like a hippie. He was always telling,
really?
kind of to your point where you just said, he was always telling his students, he's like, yeah, make it tasty. I'm like, what? What does that mean? He's like, yeah, cool. Just do something. Like, say something, do something. And he was really, really interesting to be around.
Yeah.
Also, frankly, he's probably one of the first times where as soon as we all met as a class, met him, I'm like, oh, this guy is on another level than anyone I've ever met. Like his brain operates at a different everything. It was really clear.
Yeah, isn't that great? I mean, a friend of mine in New York had Rainer Benham as his teacher going through.
Wow.
Rainer Benham at the end of his career. And I mean, I think I had this guy called Barry Maitland who was part of that whole. He learned under Peter Eisenman. He was part of that the urban design scene. He was trained by them in Cambridge, and so I was lucky to have him as a teacher. I think you've got to get one, right? You've got to.
Yeah, you got to get one. Yeah. Well, look, I think this. I feel like we covered a lot of things, but also we have so much more to talk about. Despite us getting to the hour and a half mark here, I appreciate the transparency and some of the things you said at the end about your life and what you've gone through and where you're going. I'm actually really excited for you in the next chapter. Happy for you too,
Thank you.
And I'd love to keep the conversation going and see
how the
next bit goes.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. No, it's I was very flattered to, just out of the blue to receive a podcast invitation. Yeah. So, because it's a world that I'm, pretty much on the outside of now. Um, I couldn't tell you any of the, like, for example, the latest Pritzker Prize announcement came out. I went, who the hell? And I would say that about the last three, to be honest. So, but I don't think I'm alone in that.
I don't think so either. I feel like specific with the Pritzker, I feel like it used to be a much bigger deal than it is the last 3 to 5 years. I feel like it's kind of waned. And I could be completely wrong about that.
Yeah.
It doesn't deserve the hype. I think it's $100,000 award, and the committee ultimately are answerable to a hotel chain. I mean, I don't know why we even look at it.
Stephen, thank you so much for making the time on we typically do this on Fridays, but it's not what day is today? I don't even know. It's Wednesday. The next time we'll do it on a Friday so we can be even more relaxed. This was a lot of fun. Appreciate it a lot. And again, I fully love what you're doing the next bit of your life with the teaching. I think it's gonna be really, really cool.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode. If you want to support this show, then the best way to do it is leave a review of us in the Apple Podcasts app. You can also find us on YouTube, Spotify. We have a website, which is Second Studio Pod. That's also our handle on Instagram, Second Studio Pod. And we have a hotline that you can text or call to leave a voicemail. And that number is 213-222-6950. So if you're on your phone and you want to shoot us a quick text and say hi, give us a suggestion of someone to have on the show, a topic to talk about, a question, or you want to rant about your boss or your teacher or your colleagues or whatever, then go and text that hotline, which is 213-222-6950. Thanks, everyone, for listening. It means a lot. More fun stuff to come. And I think that's it for now, right?
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.